X Men Apocalypse is the third movie in the X Men prequel trilogy. It has a good cast, both the returning cast who play return to play their characters from the previous films, as well as the new cast who come to play new characters introduced in this. Well, not all of them are new, but they're just some of them are just younger versions of the older versions of the characters in the original three X Men films. But they do good with their characters as well as the ones who played new characters that weren't in any X Men films before this. Direction by Brian Singer. I think this is the last X Men movie he helped make. He does a good job directing this movie, and Simon Kinberg does a good job writing the screenplay. It has great music score, great cinematography, great visual effects. The look of the superpowers and the visual effects are pretty cool. The fight scenes, martial arts, hand to hand combat, fight choreography is awesome. The cinematography is good. The set design look at certain places like the Weapon X facility, Xavier's mansion, and other places are all done well. The or maybe it was CG in some places. I don't know which is which, but the acting is great. The like, dialogue delivery and the chemistry the actors have with each other playing their characters are all done well. The cameo by Stan Lee and his wife is funny. I, I'm glad that we got to see Stan Lee share the screen with his wife in this movie. Now they're reunited up there, having a good time. Hopefully, the in this movie, uh, Professor X and the X Men they have to save the world from apocalypse. This old, thousands of years old mutant who was born like I think as far back as the prehistoric age. He traveled the world, starting all these weird cults, and now he thinks he's a supreme god, and he wants to wipe out the world because he has this evolutionary like Darwinist view of survival of the fittest, and he thinks only the strong should survive, wants to wipe out the weaker mutants as well as all of the normal humans. So the X Men have to save the world, and there's some suspense in certain action scenes, like the one where Apocalypse tries to launch all these like nuclear missiles to blow up all these countries, and the Professor X tries to use Cerebro to stop it, and but it's failing, so he has to do something else. That was a pretty suspenseful scene, and the way Oscar Isaac played Apocalypse in that scene is the best scene of him in the movie. And Apocalypse is a pretty interesting villain. Oscar Isaac did well playing him. The other characters and that the characters that are introduced in this movie, Storm, the younger version of Storm, the actress who played her does a good job. Michael Fassbender does a good job returning as Magneto. I like how at the beginning he's just like family man living in peace, having a decent job at a factory in Poland, but still hiding out because he tried to kill Nixon in the previous film. But now, when this earthquake happens at work, he uses his powers to save this coworker from getting crushed. But then he's found out when the police try to arrest him. They they threaten his wife and daughter, and his wife and daughter are accidentally killed. So his evil side turns up again, and he tries to join Apocalypse. And I like Jean Grey and Cyclops how they're introduced in this one, the younger versions of them, and I like that Havoc, Cyclops' brother, him and Cyclops finally have some moments to share, but I wish they had more scenes together. I do like the scenes with Jean Grey and Scott and how Scott Summers, Cyclops, and the subplot of Jean Grey's Phoenix persona, like kicking in, and if she finally uses it near the end, help save the world, but it'll have dangerous consequences in Dark Phoenix. And I have issues with Dark Phoenix I'll get to when I review that. It's the worst X Men movie ever. This one should have been the end of the prequels. It ended very well, and it had a good conclusion and a good ending. And the final showdown between the X Men and Apocalypse and his minions was pretty cool. And the Psylocke, Olivia Munn did a good job playing her, and Ben Hardy was good as Angel. And I like how the Psylocke, how she's a lot more hot and a lot more tougher than she was in the X Men Last Stand. That one was awful. Um, the but Jennifer Lawrence is back as Mystique, and she's pretty cool in this. She has to she kicks some butt in the action scenes, and she starts off as an anti-hero, but she goes full hero towards the end. And James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender have good chemistry as frenemies. Professor X and Magneto, and the Jennifer Ackroyd also has good chemistry with Rose Byrne, who once again plays Maura McTaggart, his love interest from the first prequel. She still doesn't have any memory of what happened because he erased it, and I like his nervousness about how he's kind of in denial about still having feelings for her when they have to go to her for help, and he's like, "How nice to see you again." I mean, for the first time, she doesn't remember nothing, and but I like how they become a couple near the end, and I like Nightcrawler, the guy who plays him, Cody Smith McPhee, pulls it off well, and I think I said Cody Smith McPhee when I mentioned Cyclops. So that was Ty Sheridan. And Sophie Turner, who plays Jean Grey, she does good too. The entire cast in this movie does great. And I love Evan Peters as Quicksilver. I'm glad that he's back in this one. And he does acknowledge that the implication in the last film that Magneto is his dad, but he doesn't tell him anything. He says, maybe I'll tell him some other time. But that, I don't think he did that in Dark Phoenix. But they wasted that. They should have had him tell him that then. That would have been part of a good conclusion, too. But I like how the scene with Quicksilver uses his speed, super speed, to stop time and save all these people from this Professor X's school when it's being blown up. That was that was a pretty funny scene, just like the kitchen scene of him doing the slow speed and the Days of Future Past. Hugh Jackman's cameo, I like him as Wolverine. I'm glad he was back in this, even if it was only for a cameo. And I'm glad his cameo was a fight scene in this one. And he he got to kick some butt. He never talks, just grunts, growls, and screams. And Jean Grey, I like that moment where before Wolverine leaves, she uses her powers to return some of his memories. Of course, I mean, J- Josh Hellman is back as Stryker, and I like Danny Houston's Stryker back better. I wish he was back as Stryker. Plus, old enough to. He looked old enough to play Stryker, who same age he was in that movie. Because this movie, I think, is set in the '80s, the same time that the first Wolverine movie was. But then the events of Days of Future Past erased what happened in Wolverine. So they could have had Danny Houston back as Stryker. And I would have liked to see Stryker and the X Men like come to a truce to help each other save the world and stop Apocalypse in the final battle. That would have been cool seeing Stryker and Wolverine fighting alongside each other. And Wolverine should have been in the final battle too. I don't like how the trailer deceived us into thinking Wolverine would have a more to do in this one. But it was just a cameo. I'm glad he had more to do in Days of Future Past. But all in all, this is a good conclusion to the X Men prequel trilogy. Well, what should have been a conclusion anyway. Then we got Dark Phoenix. I'll review that sometime later. All right, that's it for now. Thank you and God bless. I give this 2 thumbs up. Bye.